Hello, hello, hello. What's up, everybody? Thank you for joining us in our incredible panel. We got a lot of great expertise and insights to share today. I'm so lucky to be joined on stage with these three incredible marketers. And so I will allow them to do intros. Of course, ladies first. So Joanne, why don't you start and we'll move this way.
Okay. Hi, I'm Jo Lovato. I'm Vice President of Marketing for the Dallas Stars, and I'm in charge of digital marketing, media, game presentation, graphics, and productions at the team.
Hi, everyone. I'm Michelle Froah. I'm the Global Chief Marketing and Innovation Officer at ETS. And I'm sure we'll get into, you'll say, what is ETS? It's an education and talent solutions company. But I also head up our corporate solutions team, where we're doing skill-based assessments for the workforce. So.
Hey guys, I'm Ben O'Mara. I am the Chief Brand Officer of Huckberry. We are an online men's retailer and now media company. We're actually based here in Austin. So excited to be here.
And I'm Bryce Adams, SVP of Partnerships with Open Influence. We are the best creator company God has ever created. I actually got my start in New York at Madison Square Garden, so share some roots with Joe, and excited to dig into this with you. So we're here to talk about brand storytelling and really look into the future and what that means as we try to engage with future audiences. And so what we really want to wrap the whole discussion around today is, what is great brand storytelling? How has that evolved? And the thing that we always talk about are positive outcomes on behalf of our customers. So how do we measure those things? What do some of those success stories look like? And hopefully we'll have a lot of great discussion in between as we get started. So we've got a great panel across various disciplines here, and we know that really great brand storytelling looks and feels very different to each one, every person on the panel. We've got different audiences we're trying to attract, different opportunities that we can conquer, different challenges that come with that, and then also different versions of success. So what I really want to talk to is, Joanne, from your perspective, what does great brand storytelling look like for you? From where you sit with the Mavs.
The Mavs.
Sorry. Oh, God. Oh, the Stars. I don't think the Mavs are a team anymore. I'm sorry.
I'm a Lakers fan, so anyway. I think my biggest objective and kind of what I've always been tasked with is growing our fan base. So I think, obviously, we have a great fan base of folks right now, but we're really looking to grow it and get people more engaged with the game of hockey. So I think where we see the biggest area of opportunity is really through telling our player stories on and off the ice. So I think once we do that, it gives people a little bit more kind of intimate feel about our team, and also helping, maybe drive some additional views of our games and interest from what we call a casual fan. So I think everyone's kind of seen the success with things like Hard Knocks and, F1 and, those types of kind of reality type of shows that get in really behind the scenes. Our league is actually doing it right now with NHL Face Off, which is on Prime Video. So I think, what we've seen, just not really digging into long form content, is what we've seen is that, just telling those insider, personality stories of some of our team. We've got a lot of young guys on the team. People really engage with that. So I think for us, it's like, okay, how do we harness that and then take it to the next level?
That's really interesting. I think the fan development question is a big one that leagues and teams are all trying to solve, and everyone's trying to find, that Taylor Swift effect that the NFL saw a couple years ago. I was lucky enough 2 years ago to work on the NBA in-season tournament, and we talked about what are the on-ramps to fandom, sneaker culture, tech, fashion, that make people go from a casual into a diehard, and how do we engage with them? And so we'll want to double click into that a little bit later, but I want to make sure that we have enough time for Michelle to talk about ETS, because you guys have a large constituent base that you're working with. Can you talk about the audiences that you serve and the way that you guys are going about telling stories to such a wide swath of consumers?
Yeah, my history, actually, Joe and I used to work together at Samsung. So my history has always been more CPG, tech, financial services kind of focused, where you do have more of a concise audience, I would say. And this role was incredibly challenging and I think rewarding because we do have a wide base of audiences. What we're trying to do, we're a nonprofit, and we're mission-based. And we revamped our brand and told our story of our brand by first thinking about how do we change and transform the business that we're in. And from that standpoint, you have to look at all of the audiences that we have. We have lifelong learners, from K through 12 all the way through higher ed into the workforce. We have governments, policymakers that we're trying to influence with our research. And in part of our business transformation, we wanted to take lifelong learning because education really does not stop once you are out of school, right, or formal schooling, into the workforce. And so now B2B and B2E, enterprise, are part of our audiences. Now, we're a 75-year-old plus company, global reach. We do 50 million plus assessments across the globe each year. And our history and our expertise really is in the science of measurement. So our mission is to advance the science of measurement to power human progress. And that's really the basis of our brand storytelling, because all of those audiences can identify with that mission, but in very, very different ways. So how you commercialize those brand stories are obviously going to turn up very differently. And then, I think brand storytelling doesn't stop at a mission statement, a purpose, a logo, whatever that might look like. It continues through activation. So our journey on brand storytelling has been business transformation into brand transformation. We just relaunched. Next month is going to be a year. Can't believe it, but it's been an exciting year. And then innovation transformation. So that's one of the ways you can activate brand storytelling is through the kinds of innovation you're bringing. And one of the things that maybe we can talk about later is the skill-based assessments and how we're measuring skills like collaboration, resiliency, effective communication, things that are very hard to measure. And that's part of our innovation transformation.
I love that you bring measurement to the forefront of everything you do, and I want to double click into that a little bit later about how we collectively are measuring some of the effectiveness of the stories we're telling. One thing you just said that actually stuck out to me was the fact that storytelling doesn't stop at a certain point, and I feel like sometimes people think once a transaction happens, the storytelling is over. You've accomplished the mission, they have purchased. Maybe we'll get them to come back, maybe we won't. Ben, you guys are doing something really interesting because, Huckberry is an online retailer, but you're building a media company. So talk a little bit about what that means to you, to your consumers, and why you guys decided to do that when you had such a successful e-com business.
Yeah, I mean, if you go back, not to give the full history lesson of Huckberry, but how we bootstrapped the business for the first 7 years. So we didn't have a big marketing budget. We didn't know what we were really doing. So we had to leverage creative ways to get in front of other audiences. So very early on, 14 years ago, we launched online. And in conjunction with the products that we were selling, the core sort of output of our marketing was a journal. This was early before all of us were doing content and commerce, storytelling in sort of the retail space. So we had this foundation of telling the stories behind the products that we were selling, the community that we were speaking to, the overall lifestyle that we were selling you into. And those were sort of the early seeds, if you will, in our storytelling foundation. And, fast forward to where we are now, we've got a full funnel media strategy where we're developing shows on YouTube that are streaming in other channels. We're using those for customer acquisition. We're using those to obviously reinforce our brand values. And I think at the foundation of everything that we did 14 years ago and to where we are now, it's always been about creating lifetime value. It's creating a relationship with our customers first. And as we've gotten bigger and we brought smarter people into the room, figuring out the tactics in which you can use that for customer acquisition. But for us, it's always been, I think, a point that you just made. It's a reason to keep coming back to our site. It's a reason to build trust. And the more you come back to a site like ours, the more trust that you have in what we're saying, the more that you feel like we aren't always selling you something, the long-term effect is you will actually sell more. So the foundation of our business, again, we've gotten more sophisticated now. We can talk a little bit about those metrics and how we judge that, has always been around, we're in an attention community, right? We are selling product, but what we're actually fighting for is attention for our customers. And brand storytelling has been a way to get in front of the right people, our core audience, in stories that isn't always a transactional sort of story to sense. So trust and lifetime value is really how we judge like the success of our content.
It's making super fans of your brand.
Exactly.
And I'm hearing a lot about the roles that community building plays and emotion plays, and how do you layer brand values on top of that. And those are all very warm and fuzzy things, but we want to get back to, well, how do we measure the success? And so we'll talk a little bit about that. And I want to take somewhat of a futuristic approach, because we know we want to talk about emerging audiences, young people, people at different life stage with different dollars to spend, whether that's on disposable income for sporting tickets or things like that, up-leveling your skills, or like, I just need to get fly. And so when we think about younger consumers and future audiences specifically, you know, the buzzword I heard a lot towards the last year was social first. And there's a lot of social first storytelling and things of that nature. But how do you all adapt your storytelling to different platforms to reach different audiences? And so I'll give you that one first, Ben. What have you seen around consumption habits and as you build your media business? And what are those tactics that you're using to not only grab that attention and then convert those potential that audience?
Yeah, I mean, we stating the obvious here, but we start with our target consumer, right? We are targeting a 28 to 40-year-old guy, and so we have a lot of quantitative and qualitative data that informs like where we're going, the types of content, the platforms. As I mentioned earlier, we've invested a lot in the last 3 years on YouTube, right? And that is the biggest social platform in terms of new media across any generation. But our customer and all the surveys that we've done, they're getting their entertainment and they're also getting their education. You think about a product company, they're looking for how to wax your jacket, how to find the perfect trail runner. And so we have all of this data from our customers and then broad industry data that YouTube is where we wanted to focus. We also know, going back to like our core values and what our existing customer base has shown, they care about quality. They want to dive into the details, whether it's about a product or the people behind the brand or the adjacent activity. So by nature of those qualities, we know that they've also got a longer attention span. So longer form content has actually been our focus from an audience development standpoint. And that's why we've invested so much into YouTube and longer form. Now, of course, to your point, like we have to then think about, you can't put out one singular point of content, piece of content and simply cut it up for other channels. So we're thinking about that sort of master cut, if you will, of our top of funnel awareness level, long form content, and then not the trailers that you cut down for social, for TikTok, for IG Reels, but what are the stories underneath that umbrella that are obviously formatted for those channels that maybe are engaging with a younger audience. But our entire goal is actually YouTube first, and then we're continuing to candidly, like we haven't figured out TikTok. We've got a pretty good presence on YouTube, but we know our customers on YouTube. We're building a best in class, and I think that's part of the, like, who is your customer? Where are they spending the most time? What are their values? What do you do really well? Not every channel is perfect for every brand. And so staying hyper-focused and building a best-in-class YouTube presence has been our main focus for the last 4 years.
That intentionality leads to success. And knowing, fishing where the fish are, there's all different types of fish in one body of water, but do I want trout? Do I want mackerel? Whatever I need. And so how do I program my bait, in this case, the content, to get what I'm trying to get into the boat? That dovetails very nicely to Michelle. I want to go to you because you're with people throughout the duration of their lives, from kindergarten through professional. So lots of different life stages and transformations that are happening. how do you remain nimble, and how do you do that with such a huge lake, as it were, that you're trying to pull fish out of?
Plus governments, plus businesses.
I didn't want to make it political, but that too.
I mean, you know how you have a brand house? Well, we do. I blew up the house. Yeah, no, it's called a portfolio wheel, just to put it all in perspective. And so I think, when it comes to content and then how we're measuring success, I think you have to come back to, for us, we have a very complex portfolio. We have a very complex set of audiences and customers that we're going after, because we're really trying to reinvent the ecosystem, right? And we can't do that by ourselves. We're a nonprofit, like I said. We're one of the largest private, assessment companies in the world, but what we are focused on is what is the actual impact we're making, right? So with that portfolio of products and solutions and philanthropy and research and everything that we put out into the world, we're looking for some impact against certain outcomes. And those outcomes, we call those the human progress outcomes, are building skill proficiency, right? Enabling upward mobility, which is, could be across global, social, or even economic dimensions, and then unlocking opportunities for all. So, when we think about those higher order outcomes of impact that we want to have in the world, we're trying to make that tangible with readying a large number of people around the world. Can't say how many yet because it's going to be next month's announcement. But readying a large number of people around the world to be ready for the next generation of jobs, right? And, I think that's how we are creating content that motivates and activates not just our company, but our customers in the ecosystem, partners that we can bring to the table to help in that ecosystem, et cetera. So one piece of content that has been highly successful for us is what we call our ETS Human Progress Report. This year was our second annual report. We launched it at Davos. We have, it's 18 countries, 18,000 people around the world that we've surveyed across a multitude of different areas. And it's all about getting the Human Progress Index and the difficulty in obtaining progress, whether that's access to education, whether that's the ability to demonstrate your skills, et cetera, or financial means. And what that content does then is it really engages our audiences. There's governments that are interested in that. How can they help break down those barriers for their folks? Companies are interested in how do they acquire the right talent? How do they upskill and reskill their current talent base, right? And how do you actually measure that? And then individuals are, of course, very interested because they know, in fact, from this Human Progress Report, speaking of, a younger generation, we saw that Gen Z, well, first and foremost, we saw that across generations, you would think it would be the older ones, but across generations, people have what we say is FOBO, fear of being obsolete. Things, 85% plus people around the world think that the skills they have today are not going to be the skills that they need for the future, because of all of these forces. AI is changing things so much. What are the future jobs and what kinds of skill sets do you actually need for those? And so this has created content that engages our customers, policymakers, influencers, but frankly also is content the thought leadership content for our leadership. Yep. And then being able to get out there with that kind of message.
It's interesting how you have that flywheel that starts with data and insights, becomes kind of action items that then informs what your partners or customers might then do at multiple levels. And then it drills back down to then how do you service consumers or students or people throughout the life of their journey. And similar, I would assume, for what we're doing with an NHL team. We talked a little bit in our prep call about I can become a Dallas Stars fan at 6 years old, but I might not be able to buy anything. You may not see the payoff for that for 20 years before I can buy a ticket or bring a corporate outing to a game. How does that impact your role, and how are you proving that this fan development is working? Because I know it is very well.
No, I think if you look at our kind of current fan, you're looking at males 40 to 50, right? But we're seeing a lot more interest in hockey. I mean, I don't know if anyone watched the Four Nations, but a lot of interest in hockey has come up with some of the younger fans. So I think just to kind of go with what Ben was saying, I think sports teams really focus on ticket sales, right? And it's kind of like, we're going to go out there with ticket sales messages. I don't come from sports. I come from corporate, just like Michelle. So when I walked in, it was like, how much do we really know about our fan? How much do we know? So like that was kind of social at the core with the insights-driven approach, because unlike corporate brands, we don't have a ton of budget. So we got to be really careful with how we build our programming. So I think to expand our base younger and understand what that fan journey looks like, we had to do some kind of research into what are they doing outside of sports? When did they become a fan? How are they consuming media? Where do they go? And kind of being where that target live, works, and plays, and kind of building our kind of marketing programming based on that. So that's what we've been doing. We've been really kind of leaning into those behavioral insights. We are just finishing up a study on fan journey. So looking at existing fans, and it's like, how did you become a fan? Why are you still a fan? Where are you investing? So that not only can we, think about, all right, well, this is how we can reach them, but also to show the actual lifetime value of a fan as they grow up from being, younger to older, and how do we kind of support that? So it's like you want to really not alienate your existing fan, but then you do want to kind of be relevant to the younger ones you want to bring up.
And it's really interesting because from a brand perspective, we would all kill for like someone that's just going to follow me forever. We could be the worst team in the league. We could be really good for a little bit. We'll spend most of our time in between. But from the time you're 6 or 8 to the time you die, if you're a Jets fan, that's who you go for. And we're trying to get that same kind of engender, that same loyalty among products and services and things like that. And one great way to do that is creators. I don't know if you guys have heard about that. We have these influencers. They're really successful across all parts of the funnel. Don't let them tell you it's just awareness. It's not. Ben, we know creators are great at building trust, recognition, and ultimately loyalty. Tell us a little about how Huckberry thinks about creators and how you guys are leveraging them to support your content goals.
Yeah, I mean, to your point, not to use a bunch of marketing jargon, but we look at our creator ecosystem in a full funnel sort of lens, right? And at sort of that bottom of funnel testing phase, if you will, we're having a much wider swath of people where we're obviously traditional, sending them product, promoting on their channels, but we're obviously tracking not only their success, sales and engagement, but like the quality of the content. We're looking at it as sort of a, not to use a sports analogy, but like a farm league for how can we bring these people up the funnel, create long-term partnerships, have them be the face of our brand. So we use sort of our influencers as that like testing ground, spreading the word in their communities. But then my brand team is looking at, through a variety of different metrics, as I mentioned, who are people that have a really authentic community, great engagement, a real strong alignment with our brand, quality of content, so it's consistent when it comes onto huckberry.com or on our Instagram or on our YouTube, that it feels cohesive but unique to that creator. And so we're building these different levels of creators, and then we've got a couple different shows, as I mentioned, on YouTube, that those guys that host those shows, we're not TV hosts, were not media personalities before. They were people that resonated. I think that's what's most important, really authentically to our brand. They had a very distinct point of view to something that we really stood for. And we nurtured them and trained them and got them comfortable where they could be the face of shows that, as I mentioned, are now streaming and they've become celebrities themselves within the Huckberry sort of ecosystem. So we are like very maniacal around like the brand alignment. And then I think the most impactful strategy that we have is like, of course, we want to always be testing. But then when we find those really authentic relationships, like building long-term partnerships with them and finding the right ways to leverage their audiences, but also having them on Huckberry.com to authenticate our business. So it's not always ourselves, obviously, telling you what we stand for, what we're selling.
The two-way street of credibility that you guys provide to them by being aligned with you and that they provide to you all from their expertise or life experience or whatever it may be is really beneficial. And I love that you guys look at it as a way to impact all parts of the funnel. And so it's not like, oh, if this converted, it didn't work. Or, this got a ton of earned media, but we didn't see the sentiment, value proposition. So that's really interesting. Joan, for you, it's a little different because your whole team is full of creators. I mean, every athlete on the Stars is influential to someone out there. But you also talked about the balance of like helmet off versus helmet on. And so as someone who came from the brand side and now is on the team side, what's your approach been and how have you guys found success with creators?
I think, obviously, we're using our young guys as our kind of content creators, but we also do leverage influencers because I think to a certain degree, you've got this, we kind of categorize our fans in three ways. You've got your super fan, your casual fan, and your prospective fan, right? And so the prospective fans maybe don't really care so much about hockey, but maybe they'll care about the experience at the arena. So we use kind of our influencers to tell that story, whereas our guys will tell the story kind of on and off the ice. And those guys, I think it's really hard when you're working with athletes too, because they have a job to do outside of kind of supporting the brand. So I think what we had to do early on was kind of get the buy-in from our hockey ops group in terms of like, hey, if we're going to build this brand, if we're going to build continued loyalty, we need more access to the locker room. We need more, storytelling opportunities. We actually are now building content series that we'll probably, sell sponsorship to generate additional revenue for the team. So, I think that you're right. Everybody is a creator. And we have fans out there. We're actually on Tuesday, and I think we're going to talk a little bit about, I think two Tuesdays from now, we have our theme night. We're actually recognition night, Noche Mexicana. So we're bringing in a lot of kind of Hispanic influencers to kind of tell the story about hockey, because we do have a huge Hispanic fan base of hockey fans. So I think even what we did was we tapped into some of our Hispanic super fans and are having them tell the hockey story in their own way, and using them to create content for us.
I love that. That's actually a really great, I want to dovetail on that for a second. Because what you guys are doing is creating a mini cultural moment in and around the game on Tuesday to celebrate a certain audience or a moment that's happened in time. We're here at South by, obviously a cultural moment. It is March, which is Women's History Month. It was February, which used to be Black History Month. So how do you guys, it's a joke, guys. It's okay. It's okay. How do you guys balance the understanding of when and where you should show up in and around cultural moments and without it seeming performative or without it kind of falling flat? And I'll leave that open up to anyone who wants to take that one.
I'll just kind of finish up where, we were talking. I think we work a lot with the league in terms of like finding out what they're supporting, what initiatives are a lot, and all of my club counterparts, we kind of align to what makes the most sense for our market. So, we have a lot of, African-American history. So we did a Black cultural night. We do a Hispanic night because it really speaks to our audience. But what we don't want to do is seem disingenuous and not do things that are not necessarily relevant and do look performative, right? So I think one example of that is we have two of the only Filipino Americans in hockey on our team. So Matt Dumba and Jason Robertson, and Jason Robertson's one of our superstars. I keep getting asked the question, are you guys going to do a Filipino cultural night? And I keep saying it doesn't make sense for our market. We don't have the audience here. But conversely, the Los Angeles Kings do a Filipino cultural night every time we play them. So because they have that audience. So I think it's really about kind of making sure that what we're doing is true to our values, true to who we are as a brand, and then is not, disingenuous in any way.
Please go.
I would add to that. I think going back to your point of using data and insights as kind of the basis for how you show up in those cultural moments and what you really can add and bring. The Human Progress Report that I was talking about for International Women's Month, we've done a female cut of that report and have partnered with the Female Quotient actually to put great content out into the ecosphere, right? That is definitely based on a cultural moment, but also, real data from 18,000 people across the world on that. And I think if you come back to your previous one too, then we think about creators and influencers sometimes in a different way because our partners, like the Female Quotient, for example, or whoever we may partner with, become the influencers with us to change that ecosystem and those perceptions.
I'll just add one more point to that. And I think reiterating, really knowing who your audience is and where you can authentically speak. And then the other point, for a brand like ours, it's putting out stories every single day. Right. And I have this conversation a lot when we're talking about where do we speak and how do we speak. The first question I ask our team is what have we been doing leading up to this point? Right. And I think that is actually where you really build that authority and then gives you trust to speak on something. If you are only speaking to a certain month because it says that on the calendar and you are not speaking to that community, that idea throughout the year as part of your brand, then it comes off as disingenuous. So I always, when we have these conversations, let's look at the last 11 months and what have we done that is connected to this community and this story. And that gives us conviction. And to your point, having other people authenticate for us, we do need to tell you that we stand for this. Look at our scope of work and look at all of these people that also say that we stand for these things without us getting on our pedestal and saying, hey, look at us this particular month.
Yeah, and we do that too. I mean, we have our Dallas Stars Foundation, who every day they're on the ground working with these communities. So it's we can always speak to what we're doing in the community every day beyond that night.
No, I love it. I heard a lot about the value exchange, and if you're going to show up, what value you're providing to that experience or that consumer. And I heard a lot about permission and having the position to have these conversations and where it makes sense. And I think it's so great to not do Filipino, American night, or I'm sorry, I don't want to miscategorize, just to do it. When, to your point, the market, it's not going to resonate in our market, and it would come off as disingenuous or performative and could do ultimately more harm than good, but you don't just do it just to do it. I want to widen the aperture a little bit and step back and talk about some of the headwinds or pressures that come from producing these positive outcomes that we chatted about. And they're unique to each of you based on your industry and your roles and responsibilities. Ben, for someone like you, it can be more macroeconomic trends, tariffs, the economy going bad. It can be more micro to your business, just fashion trends in general and consumer spending. How do those impact your brand storytelling strategy, or as you're thinking about the moment right now, but also trying to look around the corner and how you remain to engage with your audiences?
Yeah, I mean, you pointed out some of our biggest, challenges, and it's a constant challenge working in retail, right? You're always up against trends. You're obviously always up against macro spending habits, what's going on in the community. I think what we really focus on comes back to, again, like, what does our brand stand for? What does our customer come to us for? And then what are we really good at? And then catering those stories to the mindset of the consumer, right? So when consumer spending's down right now, right? And so for us, one of our core competencies is explaining the value of a product. And so really leaning into the quality, the function, what it's being used for. People are being more conscious on what they buy. So making sure that we're leading with the education. We're not leading with some catchy headline, some editorial fluff, but really leading with that value. On the flip side, when people aren't buying, like use COVID for an example, I'm sure many of us had a pretty terrifying couple months when, especially in retail, people stopped buying everything for 2 weeks. And our business felt like it was falling off of a cliff. What we did is we leveraged our content capabilities, and we were putting out, it wasn't just inspirational stories, but stories that created a reason to keep coming back to Huckberry. What is our customer mindset? What are they thinking about? What are they interested in? What are some of their concerns? And let's meet them where they are. And so I think that's the beauty of like good storytelling, is you can meet the customer where they are. And I think from a tactical standpoint, for a retailer like ours, it gives a reason to keep coming back and to keep being engaged with your brand, even when you're not selling them something. It's a reminder that you're part of the tribe, you're part of the community, you know what they're thinking about. So that's always sort of the foundation, is like, where's our customers' head at? And let's not necessarily create something brand new, but let's like cater our message and be really maniacal about like those things that we're all feeling ourselves and our customers are, and making sure that we can flex our content to sort of the message and the sort of mindset that they are in.
And I love that, because it also kind of goes hand in hand with what you mentioned about you had built up this credibility with your customer over time by serving them content that was value added, that wasn't always sales focused, so that when there was a gap in spending, they were not all of a sudden being like, well, why are you talking to me about ABC or XYZ thing outside of clothing? So just seeing that through line all the way through shows why you guys have been so successful. Michelle, your business is global in scope, and there's a lot of, whether it's geopolitical, whether it's at the even local community level, a lot happening in and around education. So same question to you. How do some of those larger external factors inform the way that you guys speak with and engage with and build community?
I'm surprised we don't have a couch up here, because we could talk for a long time. We need a therapy session on that. You know what? It is. It's very, very challenging, particularly when you're in a global environment, and this global environment. So I would say the first challenge comes, obviously from a business standpoint, when we're working with multiple governments around the world, we're working with multiple industries, and we're working with individuals, who are at different points of their life and their journey. And there are some mega trends and mega factors, I think, that put pressure on everything, such like I already talked about, with technology and AI moving so quickly, it causes everyone to think differently about not only their work, their livelihood, but also their value, and what they can individually contribute in the world. On top of that, I think the other challenge, really is that we have to remain bipartisan. And, we are, and because at the end of the day, I come back to our social impact and the impact we want to make in the world, is that we want those for everyone, not just for one group or another group. We really want to impact everyone, because human progress means all humans, not just part humans. And so there's a big challenge against that. And then I would just say from a personal standpoint, my role has a huge remit. And so there's a lot of these different factors that come at me and my team from different angles. So, I have the customer and marketing science team. I have the communications, internal, external team. I have the web team and e-commerce. I have global philanthropy. I have our innovation team, and I have our brand and marketing excellence team on top of a P&L trying to drive business with our new solution called Future Nav, into the future of helping people with talent management and in this skill-based thing. And so some days it does feel like, wow, there's a lot of competing forces coming at you, and how do you help steer the ship? And I think you have to keep people focused on, this is our business strategic vision, right? There are bumps along the road that are going to be setbacks for us, but if we waver on what our strategic vision is, then everything else unravels behind it.
I love the idea of the crystallized vision that becomes the center of how you guys then work backwards to solve against some challenges you can see, some challenges that come out of left field, some things that maybe are competitive, onset that now bring on challenges. So that becomes very interesting. And we think about the NHL, being in a market like Dallas, very interesting because you've got such a saturation of competing sports teams. We know deep in the heart of Texas that football is kind of runs the world down here. So for you and the Stars, how do you take on those pressures? And then you're also beholden to the team's performance, right? When the team's really good, it's probably very easy to get people to pay attention and engage with them. When they haven't won a game in 3 weeks, probably becomes a lot harder to kind of keep that attention or even grab a hold of it. And we know, I grew up in DC, used to work with the Wizards with my girl Annie. Those down years can last for weeks or decades. So the team doesn't always help you out. So talk a little bit about that and some things you guys are doing.
Yeah, we are obviously not the only game in town in Dallas. So you've got the Cowboys, you've got the Rangers, the Mavs, which we don't worry too much about anymore, and then the Stars. But then you also have FC Dallas, and then you have the Wings. So we are in a highly saturated market, and we have been number 4 in fandom forever. I think now we actually have the benefit of our team is doing really well. We're number 3 in the league. We're number 2 in our division. So we actually don't have to worry about ticket sales so much more, as we did in the past. So I think now we have this great opportunity where we're able to now focus on things that are going to help us break through a bit, take a little bit of chances in some of the things that we're doing, ask for forgiveness, not permission. So I think we're doing a lot of that right now, targeting the younger consumer. So I think, as far as those challenges, now that we don't have hey, how are we going to sell tickets hanging over our head, we can focus more on the brand to build kind of that fandom long term and build that loyalty long term. I'm a 49ers fan. And so when we were doing crap for the bottom feeders, I still love them, just like you loved your team. That's what we want for the Stars. And I think one of the other challenges that we're facing is the decline of the regional sports network, right? Making it even harder for fans to watch our games. We were on Bally Sports Southwest, which is kind of now defunct, but you had to pay for a subscription. So kind of looking at those insights in terms of the consumers we wanted to target, how are they consuming media? Well, they're streaming everything, right? No one's really watching OTA anymore. So we partnered up with APMC to launch Victory Plus, which is a streaming network. It's a new home for all of our content, all of our games. It's free to anyone in our market. And we launched that in September of last year, and we're actually doing really well with it. First round of the playoffs will be on Victory Plus. So again, it's kind of addressing all of the teams that we have in our market, giving more access to fans to our content and to our games. They don't have a paywall they have to pay for. So I think that those were some of the bigger challenges that we're starting to tackle right now.
I love that. And I could, how Bill Maher does overtime, we could do a whole extra session just on the media and the consumption and all that around sports. And I feel your pain. I've been at a sales table for a team when it's after Valentine's Day and they haven't won since Thanksgiving, and you're just like, someone please, I need a lead. We're running up on time, and so 5 minutes, great. I want to give you guys a little bit of additional time to answer our last question. And we're in a room full of marketers. What advice would you all give to marketers seeking to improve how they do branded storytelling? We'll start on the end and work our way.
Yeah, I mean, I just will go back to behavioral insights, understanding the fan, understanding your consumer, and how they are engaging with media personally, professionally, live, work, and play. I mean, that's kind of coming into a sports team. Some teams are less sophisticated than others when it comes to research and insights. So I always start there, because then that informs all the marketing that I'm going to do. Big budget, small budget, that's what you kind of need to hone in on that.
I am a big fan of strategy. So before we go make any kind of change or start telling a brand story, we have to make sure that we're in the right strategic place. And so again, I come back to you can't create a brand or a brand story until you understand your business vision and transformation that might be needed. And then you can create a future forward brand that you can build to. And so, my advice always is don't let the rest of the organization push you into, we need a new logo, we need some new colors. No, what you really need is a strategy that and a strong purpose that you can come back to and have as a touchstone to build everything from.
Yeah, one my team, if anyone was here, would roll their eyes. But one thing related to that strategy that I always say and remind ourselves is, the content, the story that you're telling is only as good as the people who see it. Right. And so that is a combination of really having those strong insights of who your customer is, where they are, the strategy in which you're going to distribute that content, how you're going to judge success. And I think foundationally for a brand like ours, having that really steadfast lens, connecting the dots on some of the things we've talked about today, what can you uniquely stand for? What is your lens to those consumer insights, to those channels? Doesn't mean we have to be playing in everything, every story, every format. So having a really strong conviction on what your brand stands for, those values that then you interpret through the strategy, interpret in partnership with your insights. And then I think, again, coming from our standpoint where we're building a lot of serialized content, you also, and this connects to the strategy, you have to have a long-term view, and you have to be willing and ready to commit and having the right resources and knowing what it can look like. And then always being able to read and react. We have another saying where you always throw out your first pancake, right? And the best stories continue to iterate after you test. And so we take insights, we take strategy, but then we go. We put out a pilot, because that's always where you learn the most, seeing how the consumer engages, seeing how the creative looks. So it's a big soup of a variety of different things, but I think really knowing where your brand can show up, where your customer is, strategy, but then being aggressive and moving fast and not being afraid to fail on the first attempt as long as you've built that roadmap ahead of you.
I love it. I want to thank you guys for making us smarter today, dedicating some time to this panel. Thank you to the audience for joining us and the Brand Innovators team. Thank you so much. We'll see you guys.